The questions you have about anything to do with the Islamic dilemma in particular?
Yeah, no, I'm still studying it, so
That's
thanks
cool.
for clarifying
No worries.
all of the
Do you have my
points.
book? You should totally get my book.
No, my friend does, so I'll get the
Of course,
reference,
he's got the book.
off it,
It's
yeah.
worth like I say, I don't write it. I write it very neutrally and respectfully. I'm not insulting anything.
Now you're a nice way of arguing, so it's
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I back it with references. I quote Abdullah Galadari, for example, try to represent his position fairly.
And one last thing I would say is, the Quran says that it's here to confirm and to correct.
It doesn't say correct.
Oh.
No.
What does it say?
So Muslims will often say, based on a single verse, and that's Surah Al-Ma'idah, ayah 48, they will say that the word muhaymin means corrector. Now, this is not. So, for example, if you look at Nikolai Sinai's Critical Dictionary of Arabic, which is a great book, it came out a few years ago. He knows Arabic, and he literally went through all the Arabic words, and he gives the definition. He would say, at best, you can say it means an authority. And I would say that if something's an authority, that still doesn't get you to corrective. So in the same way that I have a boss, right, at work, he's an authority over me, but that doesn't necessarily mean he corrects me. He may actually think I'm doing a good job, right?
Maybe it's the translations that I read. I try and find a verse that says
the clear Quran is probably the most wrongly translated one, I would say.
Yeah.
But most of them would just say it's a guardian, it's a protector. Like those words are, if you go for the traditional Arabic,
Arab
like I'm talking about scholars, early scholars, and medieval scholars. They look at it that way.
Yeah.
But in the medieval period, you start to see an introduction of, no, it's a criteria, it's a corrector, and then they introduce this. Oh well, the Quran is actually changing and correcting the previous scriptures because they are aware of this problem. And they want to start addressing the problem.
And I think that's the opinion I hold. If the Quran does say it's here to confirm and correct, it has the freedom. It has the freedom to say yes, that is right, and it has the freedom to say no, that wasn't right.
Hang on, brother. We'll have a chat afterwards, but I'm going to chat
about,
this one. But I'll have a chat afterwards.
Think about like God.
Right.
If there's certain things that mankind has kept and certain things that they've corrupted, what would God do if he needs to be merciful and to communicate that? Right. He'd say exactly that.
Why he's correcting things.
Here's another book, the Quran.
She's correcting.
I'm going to correct you, and also I'm going to confirm whether you were right.
Okay.
So yes.
So here's the problem. I understand why you might think that, but here's the problem. Is the Quran's main function, or just one of its big functions, one of its thematic functions, right, is to correct prior scriptures? It would have to be huge. Because the Quran fundamentally, okay, so put it this way. No story of the prior prophets in the Quran lines up exactly with the biblical text. So that would mean that the Quran would have to literally explain, right, you guys say this, actually, no, this is the correct one. And if you're a Sunni or Shia Muslim, it actually gets even worse because you hold to like, I don't know about you personally, but a Sunni or Shia Muslim would say the doctrine of Isma, the doctrine of the infallibility of the prophets from sin. They can't intentionally sin. But the Bible, if you look at like Noah, for example, he gets drunk and he's seen naked by his son. Judah has sex with his daughter-in-law, right? So they deny these things, but does the Quran deny them? The Quran never denies them. But if the Quran's main function is to act as a corrector, surely it will correct these obvious, like wrong things from the Quranic paradigm.
But it does correct it, because when it says Noah is a righteous prophet,
right?
From that word righteous, we can derive that all of that stuff.
Where does it say Judah is a righteous prophet?
Who, sorry?
Judah. Okay, my point is you can keep doing this. Where does it say Lot is? Where does it? You can go through. My point is that if the Quran is meant to be correcting, you would expect it to correct. But there are large things that are not corrected by the Quran. The Quran author assumes that whoever's hearing it is already familiar with these stories. He's not trying to tell you. For example, very little is said about Isa in the Quran. Very little. It doesn't tell you his ministry, where he's born. Like a large part to left out. It mentions the Hawariyun, the disciples. Does it tell you the names? Does it tell you what they did? Does it tell you the miracle? I mean, it mentions some miracles, but only in passing. So the author expects the hearers to fill in the gaps because they know who Isa is, they know who Jesus is, they know what he did. So the Quran is assuming the authority of the prior scriptures because the Christians and Jews know them, so it doesn't need to repeat itself. So the Quran can't be a corrector based on that alone. If the Quran was a corrector, it would actually correct, but there are large gaps where it doesn't.
And I totally agree with you. It'd be a waste of time to go through 1,000 things.
And also, there are more.
Isn't it easier to say, Prophet Noah, salam be unto him, he's a righteous prophet, and just go on with the story?
But why would it not say that this story, for example, it does with Solomon. So for Solomon, for example, it says he was not a pagan, whereas in the biblical text it does say he's a pagan. So why does it correct there but not other places?
Again, we don't have authority over God. God has authority over us.
The more reasonable explanation, that's just one point out of many, is that the Quran is not trying to be a corrector. Again, and the whole word Muhammad, this comes from one verse in the Quran. Trying to derive a whole doctrine from one verse, especially when you talk about literally changing the words of Allah, like at least in the sense of, Allah originally did send the Torah, right? And
But wouldn't it make logical sense? Say you had a book,
right?
Your book. This is perfect. You had your book. You come back like 20 years later into the future,
right?
And it's got some weirdness in there.
Right.
When you just say, I'm the author, this is right, this is wrong.
I agree with you completely. I think the Quran author, if he really did want to teach that the prior books have been tampered with and corrupted in some way, he would explicitly have said, with no equivocation, no like ambiguity, he would have said, the Torah and the Gospel have been corrupted, and only the original is true, or only the original is actually from God. He would have said that anywhere.
What if it's only little bits?
How many verses are there in the Quran?
So
like
6,066, I think.
Yeah, about that, right? So why didn't he use a single verse to say that one statement? And that one statement would have corrected me, and it would have saved us all a lot of hassle. But instead, we get 18 verses where the Quran author says, Musaddiq, he says, this is a Quran confirming that which is with them, or with you. This is a Quran, Mabayna Yadehi. It talks about what is between their hands.
Because you don't want to go to the risk of rejecting the whole scripture that came before you.
But why didn't he just elaborate? Think of it this way, right? So 18 verses where he says, Musaddiq, confirming what is with you, right? Why didn't he say, confirming what is with you, except the falsehood?
The falsehood is too long. There's so many.
Why didn't he just summarize it? Why didn't he just say, confirming what is with you, except this bit, or like, except the errors, except the man-made stuff, except the insertions, except the deletions. He could have said anything, and this whole argument would go away. The Islamic dilemma would have been very easy to refute if only Allah had just spent a fraction of it. And the reason he does not do this is because he does not believe that to be true. He actually means what he says. He means that he confirms what is with us.
But wouldn't you say that when you come 20 years into the future and you say, I confirm this, the author, but this is the original book. So you're saying...
Well, he never gives the original book.
Like the Quran is the original book.
Wait. Okay, so where does it say that? Where does it say the Quran is here to correct or to alter anything of what you have?
It says, here's the story of the prophets in truth.
Yeah, right.
In truth.
But then in Surah 1211, it says there is a wisdom and lessons for the prophets. This is a book confirming that which is with you. That's very confusing. And the whole point of Surah 12 is that's the Surah of Joseph.
But it confirms your book.
But wait. So we have the story of Joseph in Genesis 37, right? The very last verse in Surah 12, the book of Joseph in the Quran, says it's confirming what is with us. But the Surah of Joseph differs with what we find in Genesis. So how is it confirming?
Because the story exists. The Jews know the story. God is confirming the story and perfecting it, because through Chinese whispers, it's got the details.
The problem I have with this is it'll be a bit like, what's your name, my friend?
Farouk.
So my mate Farouk here. Farouk. I confirm what he says, and I never elaborate. I just say, I confirm what he says. The whole point of me coming is to affirm what this guy says. I completely, all this stuff. And then eventually you start hearing me saying things totally opposite to what Farouk is saying here. Now we have a problem. Either I'm basically very confused, or to be honest, I'm lying, right? Because I can't say on the one hand I confirm what you say, I confirm you, and on the other hand directly oppose what you say. It's not possible. The only way you reconcile this is I've changed my mind, or I don't know what I'm saying, basically.
Yeah, I mean the way I interpret it is God's confirming that the story exists and the story is true, and then saying what actually happened. So if Allah just put the story out there and it was different, the Jews had the excuse to say, different story, reject.
But this way, can I ask you?
Yeah, forcing them to say it is the same story, don't reject it.
Okay, so for example, if something's mentioned in the Quran but it's not mentioned in the Torah or the Gospel, does that mean that what is... Actually, let's do it the way around, sorry. If something's in the Torah and Gospel but not in the Quran, is it true or not? So, for example, in the story of Joseph, it says that Jacob gave Joseph a robe, but that's not in the Quran. So, did he actually give him a robe?
It's neither true or false then.
But wait, you would have to say it's false.
We can't say it's false.
But remember what you said before. You said the Quran is giving the true account.
True account.
So if it's giving the true account and it missed something, now obviously Allah wouldn't make a mistake.
But the rest,
so He must be saying that's false then.
Anything that isn't mentioned, we can't confirm it, unfortunately.
Oh, you see, that's the point. You've given two standards. On the one hand, you're agreeing with me that when the Quran doesn't talk about things, it's because it assumes the audience already knows about it, so it doesn't need to go into detail about Jesus' ministry because they already know. But on the other hand, you say, well, if the Quran leaves things out, you don't. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
I think that's problematic.
Yeah, and I think when it leaves details out, it's talking about principles. So if it's left something out, we're supposed to derive the principal truth out of it. The robe isn't important. It's more about the lesson.
But it's not about whether it's important. If the author is supposedly the same, because remember, the Gospel is sent to the Injil is and the Torah and the Quran. It's all the same author. It's Allah. So why would Allah basically give true accounts in the prior scriptures and then just miss details out of them that were true in the Quran?
Because the details that are missed are inconsequential.
But why would he not, if it's true and it's his own words, why would he not say it? That to me is, I don't know, I find that really worrying and concerning.
Need to say it because all of the lessons that you need to derive can be derived from the Quranic version. So to mankind, Allah is saying, I've already given you the old scripture, good for you, here's the new scripture, go on it. And anything that is old and useful, keep it. And anything I haven't confirmed and is inconsistent,
but again, think of it this way. If the Quran is a corrector, and it doesn't include the detail about Joseph getting the robe from Jacob, it seems to me you would have to conclude that must be an error then. Oh, but you see, you can't give a definitive
example that is consequential.
It doesn't matter. Oh no, I would say this is consequential because these are the stories of the prophets. If the author is the same, he can't contradict his own story of prophets. I find that bizarre.
It's not contradiction. In terms of
okay, but my point is that it should be the same story. So what's going on here? Has it been corrupted and Allah is telling you it's corrupted, or he's not and he doesn't care? What's he doing?
With that, because it's not mentioned, it could have been a robe, yes. Or it couldn't have been a robe.
That he's chosen not to tell you, which is just weird.
But it's inconsequential.
Why would you, as a divine, all-knowing author, tell the story, presumably correct, right? Because you're God, and then be like, okay, so I'm going to tell the same story again, but now I'm just going to leave out parts to be really confusing to people.
Focus on certain things.
No, but again, remember that you think the Quran is a corrector. How do you reconcile that then? Under your own theology, you've got to figure out how to say, well, what's a correction and what isn't.
Because it's so inconsequential, there's no need to correct
it. Doesn't matter if it's inconsequential. I don't think it is.
Did you have a coffee or a tea? It's inconsequential.
But I wouldn't expect the same God to give me conflicting answers. Why would he say Jacob was given a robe? Joseph was given a robe by Jacob. I'm not going to say that now.
It's inconsequential.
I don't think God would do that. I don't think God would tell you a truth and then just randomly be like, let me tell you the same story. I'm not going to tell you that bit though.
It is possible because you know the Torah is so large. In the final revelation, it's been condensed for the end revelation for mankind.
Right.
So if you are condensing it into 6,660 verses, there is a chance you're not going to mention the robe.
Right. So now you've demonstrated a point though, because if you go that to its extreme, that would mean if a Quran author doesn't mention something, that's not necessarily a correction. So when Noah sinned, when Lot sinned, when Judah sinned, guess what? Doesn't look like the Quran's correcting it.
You're right, but it's very
so the Quran is not a corrector.
But it's very unlikely because the Quran says Salam unto Noah, our prophet, a righteous man. We can derive he's sinless.
But why, if the Quran's, one of the Quran's purposes is that it corrects the previous scriptures, I would expect it to do exactly that, especially on important doctrine.
But the word righteous is corrected it.
I don't think, because you're going to find these prophets described as righteous in certain aspects in the biblical text as well. So it just depends on what you mean by righteous. So I don't think that solves it.
But you're not righteous if you're naked and you're walking around, and your son's just viewing you. And you're not righteous if you're getting drunk and your daughter's sitting on you, for example. Sorry to be so crude. But you're righteous if you don't drink and you're in your senses and you're a prophet of God. So that word righteous is a really heavy meaning. in the Quranic text?
I don't think so. To be honest with you, the doctrine of Isma seems like it was just a later politically motivated doctrine. If you read the Quran, just read it, it seems quite clear that a lot of prophets actually sinned. Abraham sinned, for example, when he sinned in lots of places, but he lied to the pagans about the idol. Intentionally. Intentional lying. Huh?
I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, sure. Well, go look it up. You'll find Muslims that will actually agree. Most of them won't, though, because of this doctrine. So they'll have to explain away what's going on here, and they'll be like, well, it's not really a lie, he's being sarcastic. And you get very weird
in terms of
explanations.
Abraham lying, there is a story where they're passing through a land, and there's a king that takes anyone prisoner.
Yeah.
And for some reason, Abraham had to say that his wife was his sister.
Right, there is that bit.
Yeah.
And that's also in the biblical text.
But we don't say that's a lie.
Sure, no, I'm not referring to this. So in particular, I think it's in Surah 21, if you want to look it up. It might be elsewhere as well. But basically, the whole idea is that it's called Abraham smashing the idols.
Oh, yeah.
So Abraham is basically, he goes to some idols and he smashes them up, except for the largest one.
Correct.
And basically, he actually, if I remember correctly,
he did it.
Yeah. So the pagans go up to him and they say, who are you? Who destroyed these idols? And he says, you should ask that statue, that idol.
Correct.
And then they actually take him seriously, and they go and they argue about it, and then they go, hang on a second, and they go back to Abraham and they're like, obviously it was you.
So you're saying when he said, Abraham, peace be upon him, said that idol did it, he was lying.
So what he says is, you should ask him.
That's not a lie.
Huh?
That's not a lie.
Oh, I think it's clearly deception, right? Oh, isn't
Not
it?
necessarily.
Really?
If I say a twice or told me
If you had just done something, and some people come up to you and they go, who did that thing that you just did? And I go ask that thing.
Yeah,
I'm obviously basically trying to cover the fact that it was me.
No, I think it's just trying to say it's like unintelligible.
I personally don't think this is satisfying, right?
In your opinion, is that a lie?
Yeah, it's deception.
It's deception.
It clearly is, right? Like, if he should have just been like, yeah, it was me. He could have said something that isn't deception, but also isn't telling them the truth. I think that's a separate category. But the fact that he pointed at the large idol, and the thing is they understood it to mean he's saying it's the idol.
How about
So how they understood it?
husband saying to a wife, do I look fat in this? Is that a lie? When he says, no, you don't.
Yeah, if he actually believes that, and this is interesting because there's hadith that say you can do this, right? Yeah, it's permissible, like in this context, right? You can lie in war, you can lie to your wife to keep the peace and things like that. So I would say, yeah, it is a lie.
Okay, we have different interpretations.
Well, ultimately, you have to believe in acceptable lies, whereas a Christian, I wouldn't believe in that. I would say that all lie is bad. I would just vary the badness of the lie. But I would still say lying is bad, right?
So we're talking about minor lies, but when you're talking about big things like getting drunk, you don't believe the prophets did that.
Did Moses kill someone?
Yeah, he did.
Is that bad? Is that bad?
That's very bad, yeah.
Is
It
it a
wasn't
sin?
intentional. but
No,
yeah.
well, Moses says that
It
it's
is
an
a
action
sin.
from Satan.
It
So,
is.
Yes, but mistakes are seen as
well, yeah, again, but so Moses has a very negative opinion about what he just did.
Are you from a Christian perspective?
Yes, I'm from a
I
Christian
see.
perspective, yeah.
And so what you're trying to say is that the Quran is perfect and a corrector, and you're saying, but it misses out correcting a lot of maybe questionable stuff
Yeah, so
in the Bible and the Gospel.
Yeah, so I'm talking about a particular doctrine in Orthodox Islam called the doctrine of Isma, which is the idea that all the prophets they can't intentionally sin. Usually it translates to infallible. So,
I see.
So
Well, that is quite a very strong position. I mean,
yeah. So I'm saying, well, I don't think the
because
Quran supports this, but
because in the Old Testament they are doing a lot of fairly dodgy stuff.
yeah.
But this is because they're not perfect.
Yeah.
But then if you say they're perfect, then is kind of like saying we should all go out and do all this dodgy stuff, which we should definitely not be doing.
Yeah.
So
I don't think that's what we're saying.
they have to take very
Because
unusual ways of looking
a
at
lot
the
of
Quran, in my
unethical
opinion.
stuff is in the Old Testament, yes? You don't honestly think we should be all going out and doing that stuff, do you?
We believe in the final.
You mean like worshipping the golden calf? And what do you mean by that?
Well, yeah. Obviously, there is worshipping the golden calf, but also
Taking
like
idols.
They sort of lapse into what the Bible calls idolatry and
Right, okay,
and
yeah.
child sacrifice and all this kind of stuff. They do that for a bit, but then they get corrected. They shouldn't have done it.
Who the
So it's
prophets
a bit.
did it.
Well,
Well, I mean, the Quran it does address. Remember when I said about Solomon? So Solomon, in the later part of his years, I think it's through the women, the concubines that he takes, does engage in practices that were not becoming of him, right? Which includes other false gods. The Quran seems to know about that and seems to say, well, we don't agree with that.
Yeah.
I would think that the Quran actually thinks this is just something that people say.
Yeah, so
That's why I think so. But
I think
Yeah.
what the Quran's trying to do is
But
not trying
they're
to
killing
correct
everybody.
everything, because that wouldn't make like
Deuteronomy.
it
Kill
wouldn't
all
be
the
possible
children,
to
kill
kind
all the
of correct
babies,
everything
kill even
when
the
you don't
animals.
know
Do you
everything.
agree with that?
So the Quran is for a new audience.
don't have that concept.
So it wouldn't
Yeah,
be
so
like,
that's what I'm
in
saying.
the Bible, this is wrong.
There's a
this
dodgy
is
stuff
wrong,
in the
this
Old
is wrong.
Testament,
When
like kill
which
everybody.
means you have to go and learn
Men,
the Bible
women, children,
yourself,
even animals.
and then come back. It's not
So-
what the Quran's trying to do. It's
Should
like
we
the
be
message
doing
of the
that?
Quran is like,
That's
no,
the
this
point
is
I'm
the
making.
way to
One
follow.
person at a time.
I know I'm trying to like
Ah,
listen
sorry,
to two at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
So what I'm saying is, the Quran as a corrective is not trying to identify everything.
Are you gonna go? Right, well, it's a pleasure to speak with you.
Pleasure to see you too. Thank you very much.
No worries.
I'm just conscious of my friend. I don't want to.
Oh, of course, yeah. I forgot you came with
Take
something.
care. Hope
Yeah,
I
you
see
were very
again.
good. You were
Yes.
very good.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you guys. Assalamu alaikum.
I pray one day you become a Christian, my friend.
So
God bless you.
yeah.